All right, here we go. It's Catfish on Ice episode 202 coming up quick on the NHL regular season and the season opener between the Nashville Predators and the Tampa Bay Lightning. We have an outstanding guest joining us to give us the rundown on everything we need to know about this upcoming matchup to open 23-24. That is Rod Pedersen, who's got a brand new podcast, Cats and Bolts Podcast. Welcome to Catfish on Ice, Rod.
Chad, it's awesome. You're my first guy in the Hockey Podcast Network to have me on. So since we've officially joined, so thank you so much for the warm welcome, and I'm very excited to talk hockey with you.
Well, we've been connecting on social media for a while. I've been following you. I love your show, your daily show. I love all your content and everything. I love your hockey stuff, everything about it. So yes, Rod Pedersen and the Cats and Bolts Podcast has joined the Hockey Podcast Network family, and so we're so happy to have you. And it's just great. And so I was like, I couldn't think of a better guest to have on less than a week away from the season opener between the Predators and the Tampa Bay Lightning. And we are brought to you by DraftKings, promo code THPN. Please hit subscribe on our YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube, and welcome in. All right, so Rod, let's get into it right now. Let's set the table. First thing I really want to get into is, as from a Predators fan perspective, you know, the overall theme of the Lightning is that they're not the same Stanley Cup team they were. They've regressed. They've gone back to being an ordinary team. So I just want to get your thoughts overall in general on this year's version of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Well, I've been watching them since the rookie tournament in Estero. Mid-September, second weekend of September. And I understand that was all rookies. I watched the Lightning there, obviously watched the Predators too. I've seen a lot of the Predators this fall, so I hope we can talk about that in a second. But I think with the Lightning, as you know, it's the usual suspects, led by John Cooper. And the huge news about Andrei Vasilevskiy, going to be out till Christmas, probably. And the biggest bomb is the Steven Stamkos news. I mean, let's be honest, if that should have rung alarm bells. A few things caught people off guard coming out of Tampa Bay's training camp here in September. One was Steven Stamkos on the day before training camp saying he's frustrated and disappointed. Direct quote, as you probably know, that they wouldn't talk contract extension with him or a new contract with him. And it's my thing was, as a guy that's been in sports my whole life, why are you saying this now? On the media day, the day before training camp with Steven, why, Steven Stamkos, are you saying this? Unless you're really upset. And you're talking about the face of the franchise. You're talking about the captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning, Steven Stamkos. That's not good. And then like 10 days after that, they dropped the bomb that Andrei Vasilevskiy is not going to be ready for the start of the regular season. And I'll be honest with you, I happened to be at Amerant Bank Arena a day or two after that news dropped, and I was talking to the Panthers people, and I was like, did I miss something? Was this hinted at? And they're like, caught us off guard. So those are two really big things coming out of Tampa Bay that's just rocked everybody's world. And the other thing, Chad, is what you just said. Is this the start of the slide? And we can get into a little more of that. But I had Doug McLean on my daily show today, the former coach of the Florida Panthers and Columbus Blue Jackets and Sportsnet analyst in Canada. And direct quote from him was, I don't like the arrogance coming off the Lightning here in training camp. And I was like, well, I didn't really sense that. But if you did, Doug, you're in these circles more than me. So it doesn't sound great coming out of Tampa here, does it?
No, it doesn't. There's a lot of uneasiness. I would sense like there's a lot of this is uncharted territory. If you're a new Lightning fan, if you just started following the team over the last maybe 5 years, you maybe got a little spoiled. You expected, just to always be a Stanley Cup contender. And what me and you both know this, Rod. This is a very difficult league. So the fact that the Lightning even went to 3 straight Stanley Cups, won 2 of them, is already just a badge of honor. But things come crashing down really fast. And so let's shift it to the Predators, who are going to be facing the Lightning. The Predators have only been to 1 Stanley Cup final. They've been in the league since 98, and they've got they've basically ripped the Band-Aid off finally, and they look like a fresh new team. They've still got the usual suspects of Roman Josi, UC Saros and Philip Forsberg. But I want to get your thoughts on what you think about the Predators, Rod. Like with Ryan O'Reilly joining, with Luke Shen, they went heavy on some veterans who have proven they can be on a Stanley Cup team in history. But what do you think about the Predators offseason?
I think that they're the team that I'm going to be watching the most of teams that I don't really have a reason to watch. They just piqued my interest, the Nashville Predators. And two things that you didn't mention, but I know that probably are in the forefront of your mind, are Andrew Brunette behind the bench and Barry Trotz as the general manager. Yeah. That's a massive makeover. But I think that it's going to be a step up for them. As a matter of fact, I have the Minnesota Wild coming out of the playoffs in the Central Division, Western Conference, and Nashville getting in. That's how much I believe in Barry Trotz. That's how much I believe in Ryan O'Reilly. And Luke Shen is from Saskatchewan, my home province. So I'm a believer in all those guys. Those were shrewd moves by Barry Trotz. And I talked to the Nashville people at that rookie tournament in Estero, and they said very different management style under Barry Trotz than his successor, David Poile. And they said not that Poile did anything wrong. They love David Poile, Hall of Fame guy. But they said Barry's far more vocal, far more hands-on, and Trotzy's probably going to have to learn to back off a little bit too. This is his first year as a general manager, not head coach. Doesn't that all add up to a heck of a lot of intrigue for the Predators this year?
The Predators are just a mystery. They're a mystery for the people who cover the team and watch them daily, but they're a mystery for the outsiders as well. No one knows where to put the Predators. And, the fans I speak to close in the circles, they're frustrated. They're impatient. They've gotten so sick of this team being a semi-decent regular season team, but can never get over the hump. Haven't won a first-round series since their President's Trophy season in 2017-18. So there's just a lot of just impatience and sick of waiting. But there's a newfound energy as well surrounding this team because of what you mentioned, Rod, with Andrew Brunette as the now head coach. And I don't even want to think about how upset this fan base would be if they brought John Hines back. And I'm not trying to show any disrespect to John Hines, the former head coach, but the fans were just done with it. They were done with the stale product that this team was putting out there. And so, there's a lot of newfound energy, and fans are going to be watching this. Lightning. It's the first game of the season. I feel like it's a toss-up, obviously. Like, you never know what to expect in the first game. It's an 82-game season.
Yeah, but it's a long marathon, as they say, not a sprint. But you got two teams that want to get off on the right foot. Like, just to go a little deeper into the Tampa Bay thing, what I've heard in hockey circles is that Julien Brisebois, the general manager, wants to put his stamp on the team. He wants his people. And his longtime head scout, I don't know what his official title is in Tampa Bay, Al Murray. It might be assistant general manager, but he's been the talent finder, head scout in Tampa for a long time. Yzerman days. Kind of in a way, the architect or found the talent for those two Stanley Cup teams you talked about and 3 straight Stanley Cup final appearances. He's fired. With a year left in his contract, he was fired because he was an Yzerman guy, not a Brisebois guy. Mm-hmm. So we're going to find out if they're going in the right direction under Julien Brisebois. Why would you want to change course? Why would you want Steven Stamkos to sign elsewhere and not finish his
that's
career?
Just a weird situation all the way around, for sure. Because just an outsider looking in, I've always been such a fan of Steven Stamkos. He's such an easy player to just obviously respect, but just cheer for. Like, no matter what team he plays for, he's the ultimate professional. And I can't figure out. He's definitely one of those players that it would be so strange to see him in any other sweater than a Tampa Bay Lightning sweater.
Yes, and yet it's happened a million times. So who would have thought we'd see Mike Modano in a Detroit jersey? I still have PTSD from that. Yes. Because I honestly grew up a Dallas Stars fan. My dad worked for them. It happens. So we need to, I guess, get used or think about the possibility of that. But
yes,
Elliot Friedman in Canada is one of the top insiders, and you see him on NHL Network. And in his 32 Thoughts podcast, his thought out of Tampa Bay was, he goes, in my circles, I'm hearing that the Lightning wouldn't be that upset to say goodbye to Steven Stamkos.
That's so crazy.
And in Canada, it was a collective. Most notably because he's a Toronto guy. And that immediately got tongues wagging that maybe he would end up with the Leafs, and that's a discussion for another time. But you brought me on to get a sense of what's happening with the Lightning, and I think we got to the heart of the matter fast.
Yes.
A lot's happening with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Well, at least the color scheme would be similar. He goes from Tampa Bay to Toronto.
Almost identical, yes. Yeah, almost identical. Well, I hate when they play each other. It's hard to tell them apart.
So I want to get more. We have Rod Pedersen on Cats and Bolts podcast. Please go check that out. Part of the Hockey Podcast Network. He's got a daily sports show as well. We will share all that in the episode link. So pumped to have him on in episode 202 of Catfish on Ice as we get ready for the season opener. Less than a week away, coming up on us quick. Finally, I want to get more into because it's really a huge pendulum swing in this matchup. If Vasilevskiy's in net, I feel like the Predators could run into just another great, outstanding goaltender. You've got Saros versus Vasilevskiy. Vasilevskiy has historically been really good against the Predators. The Predators are trying to figure out this new offensive system. They're the only team, Rod, that hasn't won a preseason game yet. I'm not too worried about it, but still, it's worth speaking about. They're trying to figure out this new system under Andrew Brunette. I feel like Vasilevskiy would just, if he was fully healthy and was able to play this game, would pretty much tilt the scales pretty heavily in Tampa's favor. And I still think they're the favorite going into this game. But what are we thinking about the situation for backup goalie, or who's going to go in? Are we thinking Johansson for the Lightning? Are they going to stick with him? Or, I mean, are they going to is there still a possibility they could add someone late in goal, like a veteran?
Well, listen, as we sit here and record this podcast, the Lightning have 2 games left, and I think that's a big indicator that those games will indicate who's going to start in week 1. The Panthers have just for instance, and those games are against Florida, so the Panthers already announced Sergei Bobrovsky starts game 1. Not a shock at all. Tampa has not made that declaration because they can't. So you mentioned, who they affectionately call JoJo, Jonas Johansson. He started the last 2 games as we sit here and talk today and recorded shutouts in both for Tampa. So I would think he's got the inside track, but he's not a household name. And the other guy that John Cooper, the Lightning head coach, mentioned the other day was Matt Tompkins as the other guy. And I'm like, listen, I'm a hockey guy. I was like, who's Matt Tompkins? I had to go to the computer to look him up. He's from Sherwood Park, played at OSU, and he was a junior A guy then OSU, and he's hardly played in the National Hockey League. And the one thing John Cooper said was, we're going to have to play better defense and not allow as many scoring opportunities, not allow as many shots. That's what we're going to have to do while Vazzy's on the mend. I got to think, Chad, this is a pretty serious surgery that he had.
Yeah.
That the Lightning knew all summer that it was coming. How they kept that under wraps, I have no idea, other than sending him back to Russia, and so nobody could find out. It was a shock to the Florida Panthers people. I got to think the Lightning knew, but they didn't go out and get a goalie.
And I think that's where they're
probably going to.
I think that's where some people are confused by is if they knew it was coming and they knew it was this serious, why didn't they get a plan B in place? And maybe Johansson is a good plan B. And I mean, I'll tell you right now, Predators fans have nightmares all the time because we are notorious for making unknown goalies look like Vezina Trophy caliber goalies. So, I mean, that's all I've gotten on social media when I've been talking about this matchup and talking about the whole Vasilevskiy thing. It's like, oh, don't worry. Predators fans will make whoever they throw in net. If it's the hot dog stand guy, they'll make him look good. So yeah. That's just our perspective, but
that might be what we're looking at. For your sake, I hope not. But I do want to say this. A poll came out earlier this week that Andrei Vasilevskiy was voted the #1 goalie in the NHL by the players. I don't know if you saw this poll or not. It was put forth by the Canadian Press and Associated Press.
I did not see it.
Okay, well then you didn't see who number 2 was.
Was it Saros?
Yes, by the players.
Wow,
and
that's great.
Very well, for sure, because that's the poll that I go by. Sorry to say, not the media. I go to these games now and I look around the press box. I'm like, you guys aren't even watching the game. The media. And I'm like, and you guys are voting on these awards? No wonder people question them. When the players vote in these surveys, I put a lot more stock in it. But having said that, I don't know if you followed the doubleheader the Predators played at the Panthers here a couple of weeks ago on that Monday. Did you watch them? I was there. Everything.
I caught most of almost all of the first game. The second game, I did miss a good chunk of it, and I had to go back and kind of and fill myself in.
All good. Well, the scores were 5-0 and 5-2 Panthers, and every single thing that went at Saros went in. I was like, he's not even trying. And I've seen him play live. I'm like, that's not him. But it is him. The program says it's him. His jersey says it's him. So he wasn't trying real hard. But I also get it. He's a gamer. He's not a practice goalie, clearly, or an exhibition goalie. But the interesting thing, and you would have covered a million times on your podcast, Vasilevskiy 6'4", and the shooters were saying you can't even see the net when you're coming down on Vasilevskiy. And then they said, but the total opposite, you see Saros at 5'11". And I can tell you that the hockey people in Canada, I mentioned my dad being a scout for the Stars. He's not with us anymore, but he was a scout for 26 years for the Dallas Stars. They're always looking at goalies, looking at trends, and it's always been 6 foot, actually 6'2" or better, higher, taller goalies. Saros is like making people rethink, maybe there's something to be said for sub 6 foot goalies. So I'm cheering for him. I really am. I hope that he's that guy. There was also a rumor this summer, you talk about the offseason for the Preds, that the I got the rumor. I got it from an NHL scout myself that the Winnipeg Jets were talking to the Predators about a trade, Hellebuck for Saros. And obviously it didn't happen.
I'm glad it
Not
didn't.
yet, anyways. But obviously you're a fan and wouldn't like to see that happen.
I respect the hell out of Hellebuck. Don't be wrong. I mean, you're talking about Saros and Hellebuck, I'm sure you know, Rod, they're the two most dependent on goalies in the league over the last 2 years. I mean, they just pile up the starts. Both the Jets and the Preds rely heavily. And I've been reading throughout the offseason, I'm sure you've seen some stuff too, Rod, about how I know Bruce Cassidy, the head coach of the Golden Knights, talked about it in an article I read, talking about coaches want to have a 1-2 punch in net. They don't want to significantly override one goaltender, wear them down. You want to have that two-pronged approach and ride the hot goaltender, pick and choose throughout the season. Okay, this guy's really on a hot streak. This guy is not letting anything by. But the Predators aren't in that situation yet. But I will say, and I'm sure you know this, but Saros has got 2 years left on his contract, and the Predators are in a really, really weird predicament right now because they've got Yaroslav Askarov coming up through the ranks, who's, scouts say he's definitely top 3 prospect goalies in the world. There can be some argument on whether he's the best because there's some good ones out there, but they're going to have to make a decision really soon on one of those two. And you have Kevin Lankinen, who's a quality backup. So, yeah, I mean, I would hate to see Saros go, but if the right trade comes, I mean, how do you say no?
Well, it's all going to depend on where teams are at trade deadline time. There's, I looked that up when I heard the Hellebuck rumor to Winnipeg with Nashville. I looked up Saros's contract, and he's got a few more years left. He's not going anywhere. So this will depend on him really and how he plays. But just consider this. Nashville's in a really good position. I think what Cassidy said was right, and what you've said, you don't want one guy playing all the games, although that's probably going to happen with Bobrovsky in Florida. And let's be honest, that's what happened with Vazzy when he was healthy. Maybe that's why he's having back problems right now. I'm not sure. Yeah. But how would you like to be the Lightning going into the season that maybe Johansson's the guy? He's probably the guy. And if not, Matt Tompkins, we haven't really even heard of. He was a 7th round pick of the Chicago Blackhawks, and I don't think he's played an NHL game.
From what I remember looking up Tompkins, he looked really good in that first Lightning Preds preseason game, though. He did. take that for what it's worth, but he did look good in that game.
Well, that's the one thing about goaltenders, and I was one. All you can do is stop the puck. I don't know if you remember a goalie for the Minnesota North Stars in the 80s by the name of Don Beaupre. He wasn't very big, and he was asked about not being very big. He goes, I just have to stop the puck. I don't need to beat it up. So preseason, regular season, playoffs, just stop the puck. And so, I'm with you. So good, so far, so good for Matt Tompkins, but they are not in an ideal situation. But the one thing that we should talk about is how the Lightning lineup has been overhauled. Because when they play, you're not going to see the Corey Perrys and the Pat Maroons. Killorn's gone. Their entire fourth line's changed. It's a very talented team, but they made a significant move to get younger with all those guys gone. So probably won't be as chippy game as the ones you've seen in the past with those guys gone.
Yeah, I would say that the Lightning are still extremely top heavy and have some of the best stars in the game, obviously, with Kucherov and Braden Point. And I still think Victor Hedman is, I would argue, maybe a top 5 defenseman in this league, even at his age now. I mean, they're still going to win a lot of games. They're still going to be in a playoff race. Are they a Stanley Cup dynasty type of team? No, but they're still a quality team. They're in a tough division, obviously, and then a lot of things have to work themselves out. I want to, so since we have tons of Predators fans listening, and first of all, Rod Pedersen, thank you so much for joining our podcast. It's been an honor and a pleasure that you jumped on and found some time with your busy schedule to jump on. Our listeners are going to love this episode. And it's been such a blast these last 20 minutes just doing this podcast in this segment with you. But our Predators fans, even though he no longer plays for this team, I want to revisit the trade. I think you know where I'm going with this. And I want to talk about the guy that no matter who he plays for, Predators fans in Smashville will always love this player. And that is Tanner Jeannot.
How did you know that I love him too? How did you know that I love him too?
Because everybody loves Tanner Jeannot.
Yeah.
So what do you see his role with this team going into his first full year? I know he only scored 4 points in 20 games, but he is so much more than just a point scorer, obviously. So what do you see with his role with this team and what he's going to do for the Tampa Bay Lightning this season?
You're not going to like this, nor are your Predators fans, but he's going to be awesome for Tampa. And I'll be honest with you. He's from Oxbow, Saskatchewan, same home province as me. I've followed him in junior, called his games. I mean, I'm not that far removed from living up there. And just when he came out of junior, because I believe he was undrafted, I had a lot of NHL teams calling me saying, what can you tell us about Tanner Jeannot? And I said, he might be an even better NHLer than he is a junior, and he was a great junior. Said he honest player, tough player, gritty player, and a reliable player. Does that sound like what you saw in Nashville?
Yeah.
He's all those things.
Through and through.
Yeah, and he ended up signing with Nashville. I told every team that, and he was that for Nashville. So when they traded him, I was surprised. But I'm like, Predators' losses, the Lightning's gain, and you mentioned his stats there were modest, and then he got hurt in the playoffs. I think he would have had before the playoffs, I think he would have had a significant impact on that Leafs series that went 6 for Tampa if he was healthy. Yes. And it's a funny story. Brett Wilson, the name may not mean anything to you guys, but he's one of the Predators owners. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a huge TV star in Canada. Like, you're familiar with Shark Tank, Chad, on ABC?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Canadian version's called Dragon's Den, and he's one of the dragons in Canada. So I've stayed pretty close to the Nashville scene because of Brett. He's from Saskatchewan too. Billionaire oil and gas guy. And so, funny story, he was in downtown Nashville going to a game across the street in front of Tootsie's, waiting at a red light. And who does he run into but Tanner Jeannot's mom and dad and Tanner? I think they were on the way to the rink. Tanner had no idea who he was. Doesn't watch ABC, doesn't watch Brett, but his parents were jumping up and down asking to get their picture taken with him and autograph with Brett Wilson. Yeah, but Tanner had no idea who he was, which does not surprise me. Tanner, just old school, meat and potatoes kind of guy, and he's going to be great for Tampa. I don't think Lightning's fans know what they're getting.
Yeah, I mean he's like you said, meat and potatoes. He's a guy you want to have on your squad when you are in the playoffs. It's a big letdown that he wasn't able to play in that series because he is a playoff type of player. Like he's not going to stuff the stat sheet all the time. Even though he did score, he had one season with the Preds when he really got his chance to break out and be a regular NHLer. He proved that he can score goals. I mean, he's not like some black hole that can't score goals. Like, no, this guy has a two-way game to him. He's got some chippiness. Obviously, he needs to rein in his emotions at times and not take the really bad penalties, but he's an enforcer that can score goals. I mean, what can you ask for?
He fought the other night and scored when Tampa Bay beat Florida 2-0 in Orlando in a very physical game. It wasn't like a couple of years ago when the two teams brawled all night, which I thought was awesome. But yeah, so Tanner will come in with the Lightning to face the Preds in Game 1, and
it's gonna be hard to watch that for us.
Yeah, do you think they'll do a video tribute for him or not?
Whenever he comes back to Nashville to play at Nashville, I would love it. He wasn't here that long, but
yeah,
I think that the team understands how much this fan base really gravitated around him and loved him in his short amount of time here. Blue collar guy, undrafted guy, all that stuff embodies what Smashville's about. We've never had a lot of superstars with the Predators. Roman Josi, outside of goaltenders, really Roman Josi and Shea Weber, defenseman has been our league-wide superstars. We've always been eluded by finding that dynamic scoring type of forward or center. But Tanner Jeannot, I mean, he just really took the fan base by storm, and it was hard to see him go. You get that haul of draft picks, so you understood it. You understood it, but it was still really, really difficult. But Rod, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure we'll catch up with you again at some point. Rod Pedersen, Cats and Bolts podcast, daily sports show. We'll share all of his stuff in the episode description below and on all of our social media accounts. Rod, thank you so much, man.
Chad, I really appreciate it. Thank you. And I want to get you on my show too. Talk some Preds if you're down with that.
Let's do it. Yeah, I'm always available to talk about hockey with anyone who will have me. Anyone who will have
me. Me too.
All right, we're gonna move along here. We got another segment here at the end of episode 202. Just a quick segment on some of the latest news around the Predators. But until then, take care, everybody. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Please hit subscribe below. It really helps a ton. And until then, everyone have a great rest of your day. Take care.